Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be going over the massive flooding threat that continues on the west coast of the United States. We'll also break down the severe weather potential that'll increase over the next couple of days in parts of the United States. I'll give you a latest breakdown on both of those situations and more in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with the west coast, where this massive low pressure system continues to dump rain across areas like California, back through Nevada, and even into Oregon is beginning to see an increase of rainfall, and this is just going to continue over the next several days. Luckily, this trough will not continue to dump rain in California, but there will be more atmospheric rivers that continue to bring more rainfall over the upcoming days. On the other hand, we're watching the potential for a trough to develop over the Rocky Mountains over the next 24 to 48 hours. This will eventually move to the east and bring the potential for severe weather in areas in the lower Mississippi Valley back through the southeast United States over the next several days. So we'll have to watch that potential very closely. But beginning with the west coast, there are still a lot of watches and warnings out there, beginning with the flood watches that we have across areas from about Eureka all the way through San Francisco, goes all the way into Los Angeles, by the way, which some of those areas have seen as much as almost 8 to 10 inches of rain just in the last 24 to 36 hours. So it's been unbelievable what we've seen here in California so far just in the past day or two. Also, the potential for flooding does exist for the rest of the day today. However, this threat will start to go down as rain starts to really wind down here across California over the next 24 hours. There is still a moderate threat for flash flooding for the remainder of today for those near Los Angeles. Otherwise, a slight risk for flash flooding exists up and down the west coast of California, all the way back through the Bay Area. So for the rest of the day today, we're going to really be talking about scattered showers for the next couple of hours. This will all begin to wind that down though overnight tonight. So really by this evening, just a couple of isolated showers or downpours still remaining, especially back up in Northern California near San Francisco. Eventually going into the overnight hours tonight is when we'll start to see another band of light to maybe a couple pockets of moderate rain begin then, and eventually going into tomorrow afternoon is when more moderate rain will begin across areas in Northwest California, which some of this could equivalent to maybe an additional inch or two of rainfall. And eventually going into late Wednesday night into Thursday morning is when more heavy rain is likely to begin back up in Northwest California, which is another potential for flash flooding up that direction. So another dangerous situation is expected there, but that's not until about late Wednesday night into Thursday. For the next 24 to 48 hours, this is how much rain is being forecasted from now all the way through at least Thursday morning, and we're still talking about an additional 1 to 3 inches across the northwest area of California. Areas like Redding could see upwards of 2 inches of rain, back near San Francisco possibly around 2 inches as well. Some areas could see isolated amounts as high as 5 to 10 inches of rain. Again, I mean, we're still talking about much more rain to come. This is not it. We're gonna have more atmospheric rivers coming as this Pineapple Express does continue. Now, I do have some good news for those in Southern California. Not a whole lot more rain is coming, maybe an additional half an inch of rain at most, but otherwise the rain is going to be winding down over the next 24 to 48 hours. So at least the flooding threat will subside for the next about couple of days before another chance of rain may come by the weekend. Back over in Northern California, this is how much rain we've already seen just over the past 7 days. There's been a lot of rainfall, and those brown shaded areas are representing 10 plus inches of rain, most notably near Redding, California, and as well as south of Eureka. Those are the couple of hot spots. Even northwest there of Santa Rosa, excuse me, those areas have also seen upwards of at least 10 inches of rain just in the past 7 days. That does not include any rain that we saw before that, by the way. Upcoming rain over the next 7 days, unfortunately, a lot more rain is to come. San Francisco may luck out around 2 to 3 inches of rain, but otherwise, the further north you go, the worse it gets. We're still talking about an additional half a foot to maybe even a foot of rainfall just over the next 7 days as this Pineapple Express does continue in California. Now, the big talk is also the severe weather down in the southern tier of the United States, but actually going into tomorrow, we do have a very tiny marginal threat of severe weather, and I'll explain why in just a second, because this marginal threat originally was massive. It extended from Texas all the way back through Indiana. Now it is this very small area from southeast Missouri back through western Kentucky, but overall this is a very low chance for an isolated storm or two with damaging winds and maybe a brief tornado or two going into the late tomorrow night and even into the overnight hours. The big reason why though is because we have a warmer little pocket of air aloft trough, which is going to basically keep a cap in place. And also the moisture is not going to be that present with any severe weather that were to happen anyways. You can see the dew points for the most part between the 50s, if at best in the low 60s. So there just isn't a whole lot here to be able to fuel thunderstorm activity. And even on the other hand, instability is going to be very minimal as well. So a couple of big issues there. The best case scenario for storms to develop is the European model here, which does indicate a couple of storms maybe developing in northeast Texas back through western Arkansas. But this basically is indicating really not much of a cap, which if this were to happen, it would be very isolated storm activity overall. But regardless, I do expect very minimal storm activity. This is the HRR model indicating maybe a couple of storms in that marginal threat of severe weather. This is what I would expect tomorrow night. And this is like the only storm activity, by the way, happening across the Mississippi Valley. So there really won't be much tomorrow. It'll be very isolated, but be monitoring this because there might be some isolated damaging winds or even, again, a brief tornado. This will be most likely after about 10 o'clock tomorrow night. So it's a late night threat. Morning hours is when storms may start to really ramp up. And this will all lead into our threat on Thursday. There's already a slight risk for severe weather from Alabama back through Georgia and into southeast Tennessee. There is a marginal threat that extends all the way back into eastern Louisiana, extends as far north and east as areas like Kentucky. This will be for the potential for mainly damaging winds. However, a couple of tornadoes are not out of the question. So beginning with the southeast going into late Wednesday night into Thursday morning is when storms will fire up primarily from Louisiana all the way back through Tennessee. Eventually going closer to lunchtime is when most likely a broken line of storms will develop. This will pose the greatest threat for damaging winds with, again, a couple of embedded tornadoes not out of the question. Those should be brief in week though. Eventually going into the late afternoon and evening hours is when that line will move into areas like western parts of Florida all the way back into North Carolina. And by the overnight hours, this line will begin to weaken with the possibility for a couple of isolated damaging wind gusts remaining going into the overnight hours, but the threat should really lower after about sunset. All right, going further to the north into areas in the Ohio Valley, this is another area to monitor for severe weather into Kentucky and maybe into southern Indiana, but another concern is going to be the potential for some heavier snowfall on the west side of this trough. This might bring a little bit of wintry precipitation for those in Missouri and then eventually going into Michigan as well, and this will eventually pose a threat into New England as we head into this upcoming weekend. However, most of this should just be a lot of rain for most of New England. However, there will be a possibility for some light to moderate snow on the backside of this trough, maybe a little bit of lake effect snow, but it should remain pretty minimal. Nothing like what we saw with Buffalo with the 50 to 60 inches of lake effect snow, but there might just be a little bit there near Lake Erie. Make sure to like the button down below, subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.